So we're gonna talk about all the books I've read in January. So I've read, I believe, 11 books, and I had 7 books on my TBR and 2 books that from my TBR that I haven't read. So I did good reading wise, but sticking to my TBR, meh. But that's fine. I needed some mood reads. So yeah, let's talk about the books. Hello walls, what's up? I hope you're good. So today we're here for my January wrap up, and let's talk a bit about the stat first, because you know I'm entering everything in the Q-Pal system created by G over at Book Rose, and this month I've read 11 books and I DNF'd one, and it is actually the first DNF I've did in over a year. Last year I didn't DNF any books, we'll talk about that. And I've also read 4,114 pages. That's interesting. 100% of the books were in English. That's no surprise. But what is super surprising is that I keep buying books, you know, and out of all the books I've read, there is only 1 book that I've read physical, and 3 were audiobooks, 3 were only ebooks, and then 4 were book and ebook mixed media. So that's interesting, if you know what I mean. This is everything I have to say stat-wise, so now let's move on to the books. So the first book was actually picked by the Wild TBR, and it is The Vanishing Stairs by, no, Stair, I always say Stairs, it's Stair, by Maureen Johnson. So this is a sequel to Truly Devious. Truly Devious was for me almost a 5 stars, and this one actually was a 3 stars. This is a kind of series. I don't get why it is a series and not a standalone. I still enjoyed it, but it wasn't as surprising, it wasn't as impressive, it wasn't as addictive as the first book. Basically, you have a bunch of kids who are very smart in one specific field. They end up in a specific school, which allow them to study what they are really interested in. And you have a main character who is addicted to everything that has to do with crimes and being a detective, and she ends up in that school, and of course something's gonna happen. I'm not gonna say more because spoilery, this is the second book, but I feel like I'm scared to actually dive into the third book, and especially because there is a 4th book. So I don't know how I feel about that series. I will keep reading it. I mean, I still have the 3rd book here. I might pick up the 4th book according to how I feel after finishing the 3rd book. This is a mystery, a crime thriller kind of book, and the fact that it is not a standalone, I mean, I don't know, it's a bit weird for me. It's not bad, it just, I expected it to be as good as the first one, as surprising as the first one, as addictive as the first one, and it wasn't the case. But it's not bad. 3 stars, so yeah. If you read the 3rd book and planning on reading the 4th book, I don't know if it's already out or not, let me know if my impression is close to yours, or if you really feel like the entire series is worth everyone's time. Then we have this book, which was actually a buddy read with me. I will link her channel down below. So this is Elysium Girls by Kate Pentecost. It is a fantasy mixed with sci-fi, mixed with something else. Basically what you have is that you have a bunch of people, a city, Elysium City, stuck in the game of some goddesses. So you have death and life, who are playing a game with those people. Let's say they capture the people and offer them no access to the rest of the world, let's say, and they're kind of living in the middle of a desert. It's really like horrible to live there. There are sandstorms all the time, etc. And they have to prove that they are worth everyone's time. They have to prove that humans are good. They have 10 years to do that, and if they don't show their worth at the end of the 10 years, they will get killed, so death is gonna win. If they show they're good, then life is gonna win. I give it 2 stars, so I'm gonna say it here. It sounds so much more interesting than it actually was. I just had a problem with so many things in it, didn't make any sense. I cannot say more of it because it will be spoilery, but it was really interesting at the beginning, but some details that became more than details annoyed me. Let's imagine you are on a boat. You're on a boat, so it's completely different from what it is here, and you're stuck, you lost, and you don't know what to do, etc., and you fall in the water, let's say, and you breathe underwater. Like, yeah, I don't know how to explain it. This is a really bad example. I don't know what to say without giving any spoilers, but basically it was not really too predictable. It didn't make sense. Like, a lot of things didn't make sense, and I love things to make sense in a certain way. So that's what bothered me. So the ideas were interesting, the characters were interesting, character development is something else. I had an issue with some of the characters that were like flip and flop, like the 2 faces of a coin how do you say that, they were changing like from one extreme to the other, but it just didn't make any sense, so it didn't help me believe that this was a real world, if that makes any sense. But yeah, I'm really disappointed in that one. I expected so much more from it, so yeah. Then we have Beyond the Black Door, which is a book that I read for the Howling pack. I gave it 4 stars. I loved that book. I loved every single page of it till the end. The end disappointed me, but I was like addictive. I loved the characters. I loved the world. I loved the way it was described and the writing style. Basically, you have a girl who is the daughter of a soul walker. So basically, they enter people's soul when they are sleeping, and it is also a way to steal some secrets or to discover things, etc. It was just like, you're not gonna have a description of the world they're living in, but more of everyone's souls, and it was so good. And there is a black door that the little girl cannot open. Her mom keeps telling her, don't open that door. Of course, she's gonna do it, and things gonna happen. I loved it. It wasn't a 5 stars because the ending, I was like, what? But the rest was absolutely, I loved it. I really did love it. Then we have Through Switch, another book that was on my wild TBR, and I gave it 4 stars. I loved it. I'm not gonna lie and say that I understood everything. I was so confused at the very beginning because you have many details regarding all the different powers, all the different witches, all the different people and names and places. I was so confused, but it is so interesting at the same time. I was confused, it was confusing, but I didn't have a hard time connecting to the story and was intrigued all along the story. So that's what surprised me, because usually when I'm confused, I'm like, okay, this doesn't make sense, I'm annoyed, but it wasn't the case here. So I really cannot wait to actually continue with the series. And this is a floppy paperback, and I love floppy paperbacks. They're so good to read. But again, I read the book and the ebook at the same time. But yeah, so this is all about the story of Safia, who is a true switch, so she can tell us when someone is lying, which is something that the kingdom, like the guy ruling everything, would like to use, because this is something very powerful to have and very rare. And yeah, she doesn't want that. She doesn't want a life that everyone else is gonna decide on her to have. Does that make any sense? But she has to hide it, and something's gonna happen. She's gonna have to escape. And it is about friendship. It is about fighting and discovering truth, failing, and I really loved it. So I really loved it. I don't have the book here because I order it, but of course every time I order or pre-order a book, I get it like 2 months after its release date or something. This is just so fucking annoying. But this is Across the Green Grass Field by Shannon Maguire, so the last book in the Wayward Children series. I get 5 stars, so I really need to tell you why. I mean, it's Shannon Maguire, it's the Wayward Children series, you know I love for that series, and it got a 5 stars, obviously. This one was something I was not expecting. So if you love horses and centaurs and all the other kind of horse mythological creatures, you're gonna love that one. And also it has a representation I was not expecting. So intersex. The main character is going through something I've never read about in other books. I don't know if it's accurate or not, because I don't know anyone who went through that, and I haven't read anything in books regarding that. But I loved that book with all my heart. I loved everything about it, and I love the turn it took. Now I'm intrigued on how that series is linked to all the rest, I'm gonna say. But yeah, I'm in love with that series so much. If you haven't read the Wayward Children series, I mean, I don't know what you're waiting for. Do you need a read-along for it? Do you need a readathon for it? Then we got The 10th Girl by Sarah Fearing, which was from the Wild TBR. I gave that a 2 stars. I'm still confused and kind of mad, and I don't know, it is a horror YA kind of books. Mystery, blah blah blah, paranormal. I don't even know where to start. Something's gonna happen, 80% in the book, something like that, that makes the entire book useless, in my opinion. I loved the tension of the first part of the book. I loved how it was a bit scary, spooky, etc. You know, paranormal. They're all in a school that is isolated, far away from everything, with a lot of people who have to hide their past, and something very bad happened in that place. They are on some sacred lands where sacrifices were made, etc. So the entire atmosphere is spooky, and you're like, okay, this is gonna be scary. I'm gonna get hella scared. And then something happens, and you're just like, what the fuck? I don't even know if it's scarier than the beginning of the story, or if it's just disgusting, or if I'm mad, I'm disturbed. Have you read that one? If yes, please come to me. Then Grown, which was on my wild TBR as well. So I started that book reading it, then I switched to the audiobook, and then was like, okay, I have to DNF it. So basically you have the story of a girl who is an amazing singer, but she didn't get the opportunity so far to actually sing, you know, for something important or whatever. And she's gonna meet some guy who's gonna give her the opportunity to go in a studio, to, you know, sing and to have some like lessons, etc. But how can I say that? Like, the guy is actually an asshole. He's a predator, and that whole predator behavior bothered me. I just, like, not bothered me in a bad way or whatever, but bothered me, made me sick. I just couldn't continue with the book. Triggered so many things, and I was like, no way I'm gonna finish this book. I want my mental health to be as good as possible. I was not in a good shape or mental health like wise after many pages here. Like, every time there was like some predatory kind of behavior, I was like so tensed after, and I was like, oh no, I don't want to read it, I need to read it. So I decided to actually DNF it. It doesn't mean it's a bad book. It's well written. I love the writing style. The characters were well described. It was deep enough to connect to them, but the predatory behavior, no way. I know where it's going and I don't want to read about it. I just can't. So it is an amazing book. If you cannot read about predatory behavior, I'm sure it's gonna lead to very bad behavior and rape and stuff like that. Be aware of that while starting this book. That's all I'm gonna say. And if you know someone who has read it, maybe reach to them before reading it. I know it's YA, so that's why I don't understand how I mean, I cannot. I cannot. It doesn't mean that it's a bad book. I just DNF'd it. Not for me. Not for me. Then after DNFing that book, I needed a comfort read, so I started this one, so Turning Darkness into Light. I actually listened to the entire audiobook on script. This is a 6th book in the natural history of dragons, but it is not actually a series. This is about the granddaughter of the main character we got to meet before. Companion novel, and I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. She is as good as her grandmother. I loved her. I loved meeting her. I loved reading about her. I loved her discoveries and research and character, and I love the draconian in it. I loved everything about that book, and really I think I should read something else by Mary Brennan, because I love that series so much, but I cannot say that she's one of my favorite authors because I haven't read anything else by her. But that entire series there, amazing, amazing. And that book like was as amazing as the others. Completely different though, because she's not gonna live as many adventures as her grandmother. None. Actually, it's completely different, but I loved it with all my heart, and it was so good to actually read something like that after DNFing Grown. So yeah, loved it. I would never recommend that series enough, believe me. Then I've read The Keeper of the Lost Cities by Shannon Messenger. That was actually for the Meet the Grade monthly book club, and actually I gave it 2 stars. Let me explain. I think there is no issue with the writing style, there is nothing like problematic in that book, etc. But it was just too much for me. I totally get why a mid-grade, like why a kid would actually love that book, but as an adult, I know I'm not like target, I'm not the audience that's targeted, but the issue that I had with that book is that imagine everything that's magical. Like, imagine Atlantis, imagine the dinosaurs, imagine every single legend or folklore, anything you heard of, all gathered in one book and explained in one book. I mean, I love retellings. I love when books like The Bear and the Nightingale bring some folklore, like Russian folklore. It's not a retelling, but it brings something, one thing, a bunch of things connected to one thing. It doesn't make any sense. We don't care. But here you have everything in one book, and I was like, this is way too much. And the main character got everything she wanted. She got every single ability she wanted. I had an issue with that book. I almost DNF'd it. But I was like, no, I need to read it so I can watch the live stream. And actually I missed the live stream. I fell asleep. I'm sorry, I'm a grandma. But I honestly don't know what to say about that series, because too much going on. Too much. I love when there is one thing, like let's say they explain the pyramids or whatever, but here it was everything. Every single magical thing, legend, folklore, whatever, gathered in one place. It was just so much for me. moving on. Finally continuing with this one. So this is Death Note. This is the 5th volume, but it actually has volume 9 and volume 10 in it. It is a beautiful black edition. So it is actually 2 mangas, but I count it as one because thank you, Goodreads. But yeah, I give it 5 stars. Basically, it is the story of a guy who found a notebook, the Death Note, and every time he writes someone's name in it, that person's gonna die. I don't know how to explain, but so first I watched the anime that I loved with every single cell of my body, but then I started reading it and I loved it as much. It is exactly as I remember the anime to be, and it is the journey of a guy who becomes a villain, or at least like a moral gray character before becoming a villain, and he is on that path because he believes that what he's doing is actually good. So this is a very interesting story and I would recommend that to anyone. Then also after Grown, I needed to listen to something that was like bringing me joy or whatever. So I listened to a podcast by Neil deGrasse Tyson, but podcasts don't count as books. But I also listened to another book, which is a little book about black holes. I love that. It is hard to actually read a book here with Copilot, like a scientific book with the Copilot system, but I gave it 4 stars just because I loved it. It was like some things I knew, some things I didn't know, but some things were not explained in the best way in my opinion because I got lost and I had to re-listen to it. But I don't know if it's that person's fault or just because it's science, you know what I mean? Like, it's not a story, it's science. You have to understand what's going on in another level, and as a book you can easily reread it, and as it is an audiobook I didn't get the chance to do that, so I had to re-listen and I was like, oh my gosh, why am I not understanding? But maybe if I had seen the words and all the little things in the book I would have understand things faster. It's just because of the fact that I was a bit annoyed at myself at some point when it was talking about relativity and black holes and mega black holes and then supernovae, etc. and the what's the word, when not dimension, but time gets longer according to where you are. Like, for instance, you're in the street, it's not moving, but then you are in a train and it's moving. So it's like elongation kind of thing, and I was like, I just needed a bit more time to understand it, but I actually really enjoyed it. I love that kind of science. I'm a nerd. I mean, I'm proud of it. So, but I don't talk about it so much here because I don't know if you would be interested in it. But yeah, this is a huge part of my life. I mean, a huge part of my life. It's not like I'm spending 10 hours a day reading articles, whatever. I loved it. But yeah, well, so let me know how you think I did. I feel like I did okay. I didn't read all the books I needed to read, but I read some books that I needed. Mood reads, so to make me feel better. So I'm okay with that. I'm happy with everything I read. But yeah, well, so let me know what books you've read that you loved, what books didn't reach your expectations. Yeah, talk to me down below as usual. But yeah, well, thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to be a part of the pack. Talk to me in the comment section as usual. And until next time, take care. Bye.